All right, Unit 4. You're going to learn about preparing foods. So classification of foods, effects of temperature and time, tools and equipment, hot materials, and surfaces. All right, so the first potentially hazardous food we're going to look at is meat and poultry. So meat has a lot of protein, vitamins, and minerals, and moisture. This provides a very ideal place for pathogens to grow. If meat and poultry are not stored at refrigerated temperatures or lower, they may soon become overgrown with pathogens. Poultry carries a lot of pathogens such as salmonella on their bodies and in their feces. So when they're butchered, if they're not butchered properly, that salmonella can be transferred onto the meat itself. Pathogens will spread into meat that are ground, rolled, or minced just through the process of creating them. So that ground beef in the bottom there is going to have pathogens throughout it, whereas the inside of the roast is going to have no pathogens because no pathogens have been inserted. So we need to make sure that we store our meat properly in the refrigerator and store it away from other items, so either below or on a different shelf, items that are ready to eat that aren't going to be cooked. So milk is a rich, satisfying food source for high-risk groups such as infants and the elderly and the ill. Foods made with milk, such as custards or soft cheeses, are particularly hazardous because the milk and milk products are sources for pathogens. Only properly aged hard cheeses are safe from growth of pathogenic bacteria. However, they may become potentially hazardous. All dairy products must be refrigerated, and all milk must be pasteurized. So that just means that the milk has been heated to a point where it has killed the bacteria and is then safe to eat. So our next potentially hazardous foods are eggs. So eggs are the perfect medium for pathogens to grow and reproduce. Eggs are vulnerable to salmonella contamination just because of where they come from. Remember, the poultry could be infected by the salmonella from its feces, which could potentially get onto the eggs. Eggs in any form must be refrigerated and protected from contamination. Foods made with raw eggs, such as hollandaise sauces, are often a source of foodborne illness. Only pasteurized liquid eggs are acceptable for this preparation of any type of food. So remember, pasteurizing means that it's brought up to a point that will kill the bacteria. It's heated to a point that will kill the bacteria, and that will just make sure that if you serve it to anyone who is at risk, they won't get sick. The shell of an egg should be considered contaminated and handled accordingly. So when you crack an egg, the eggshell could get into your food, which could contaminate your food. Cracked eggs noted at the time of receiving should be discarded. If you're buying eggs from the grocery store, make sure you look and check to be sure that none of your eggs are broken. And if you do find one later on, make sure you toss it in the garbage. Okay, so our next potentially hazardous food is fish and shellfish. Fish and shellfish are protein foods and a food source for pathogens. They spoil rapidly and should be stored on ice well below that danger zone temperature, close to 1 degree Celsius. You also need to be sure that the supplier of your seafood is government approved. So that means that the government is keeping tabs and making sure that the seafood is being stored and maintained properly. So our next potentially hazardous food are cooked vegetables and cereals. So many vegetables contain protein and moisture. When raw, they're too hard and not a good host for pathogens. After cooking, they become soft and moist, which may support pathogen growth. Dry cereals are safe. However, cooked cereals have added moisture and warmth and are therefore not safe because they can support pathogens. This means if you're not going to eat it, it needs to be cooled down rapidly to that 4 degrees Celsius and stored in the refrigerator. Any other foods that satisfy the requirements for growth of pathogens, so a food source, the warmth, the moisture, should be considered potentially hazardous. A real life case. On several occasions, potentially hazardous foods such as eggs, tofu, and chicken were delivered before a restaurant was opened. The food sat for hours in the direct sunlight until staff arrived. The health inspector investigated and ordered all the food be destroyed. So this is just a case where you have to be very specific with your delivery people that your food cannot be left and must be delivered during regular hours. So some less hazardous foods, they're considered less hazardous because pathogens can't grow or multiply on them. So foods that are dry, sour or acidic, or sweet and salty are foods that can be considered less hazardous. That doesn't mean that they're not going to harm anyone, it just means that it's less likely for it to happen. So some less hazardous foods, the dry foods. Dried foods do not contain the moisture necessary for pathogen growth, but dried foods are not sterile. Bacteria or spores may be present. They are potentially hazardous foods when wet or prepared in water. When dried foods, milk powder, noodles, or cereal, are added to moist foods or prepared in water, they become potentially hazardous foods. Remember, the effect of moisture in foods can increase the bacterial growth and molds just because it gives the bacteria a better environment to live in. Okay, some other less hazardous foods, sweet and salty. Only foods that have a lot of sugar or salt added to them can be considered safe. Few foods contain a high concentration of salt and still taste good. For instance, pickled herring or pickled eggs. Foods with a sugar content of 60% or more, including jams and jelly. Those can all be considered less hazardous. You must note that unpasteurized honey should never be fed to infants or the elderly. So remember, pasteurization is just the process of heating up a liquid or a food until it kills off the bacteria. So that should never be fed to infants or the elderly. So there is an aside for the sour or acidic less hazardous foods, but you just need to know that if it's sour or acidic, a low pH does not allow pathogens to grow. So you just need to make sure that it's of a low enough pH that the pathogens won't grow. All right, so we're looking at this danger zone again. So the effects of temperature. When foods containing pathogens are in the danger zone temperature range, the pathogens will begin to multiply. The temperature range between 4 degrees Celsius and 60 degrees Celsius is the danger zone, where harmful bacteria can multiply at those temperatures. At temperatures hotter than 60 degrees Celsius, most bacteria die, and at temperatures colder than 4 degrees Celsius, the bacteria stay alive but do not multiply rapidly. Temperature can alter the growth and survival of pathogens, making hazardous foods safe to eat. Temperatures for cooking, hot holding, freezing, thawing, reheating, and cooling must be adhered to in order to ensure food safety. So these are just some recommended temperatures for cooking, hot holding, storing foods, thawing, and reheating. So for cooking, food should be cooked to the correct internal temperature of 74 degrees Celsius for a minimum of 10 seconds. The higher the temperature, the shorter the period required to kill pathogens. If a food item is larger, it requires the use of a thermometer that should be inserted into the thickest area of the food item. Do not assume that cooked foods are safe. They can be recontaminated after cooking. Hot holding. Temperatures of holding ovens should be at least 60 degrees Celsius. Hot holding ovens should never be used to warm up cold foods. And this is because if it's set at 60 degrees, that food will never reach the 74 degrees, which will kill off the bacteria. Hot foods should always be held in warming containers. Foods should never be held for longer than 2 hours for quality reasons. Freezing. Temperatures must be minus 18 degrees Celsius even while the food is in transit. Freezing is not a way to kill pathogens. Although pathogens are not active, they can still be present in the food. Frozen food is not sterile. Foods should not be frozen, defrosted, or refrozen without a cooking step to destroy microbes. Freezing fish at minus 20 degrees Celsius for 7 days or at minus 35 degrees Celsius for 15 hours will render the fish safe from parasites in raw or undercooked fish. So this is how sushi restaurants are able to serve raw fish. Thawing and defrosting. Food should never be thawed at room temperature. This allows the food to enter into the danger zone. Microbes thrive in thawing more so than in fresh foods. Defrost settings on microwave ovens may be perceived as an ideal procedure for thawing foods, but this may also produce hot spots. Therefore, this method is not recommended. Food should be thawed at 4 degrees Celsius in the refrigerator. For emergency thawing, run cool water over a plastic wrapped item. And reheating. Use the highest temperature possible to reach the minimum internal temperature of 74 degrees Celsius. A thermometer should be used. Stews, gravies, or soups should be boiled and stirred for several minutes. Any food should be reheated as if it could be contaminated. Do not just simmer when reheating. Holding ovens, steam tables, and soup urns should never be used to warm up cold foods. After reaching 74 degrees Celsius or cooking, hot foods must be maintained above 60 degrees Celsius unless they are to be immediately served. So this is just an example of a hot holding tray at a buffet type place. So they would have to make sure and check regularly that all that food is being kept at 60 degrees Celsius. Okay, cooling. We need to make sure that we're cooling fast enough. The food handler should remove food as quickly as possible before it enters the danger zone and put on ice or refrigerate. They should use shallow metal pans and stir frequently. Chill in small portions. And label every container with its date and contents. This allows the less recent products to be used first. And the picture there is someone using an ice wand to cool soup quickly. So the ice wand isn't going to be adding any liquid, but will cool that big pot of soup down very quickly. So cooling temperatures. You need to cool from 60 degrees Celsius to 21 degrees Celsius within 2 hours. So after something's been cooked, if you're putting it in the fridge, after 2 hours, you should be able to check and see that it is at a room temperature of 21 degrees Celsius. You need to cool from 21 degrees Celsius to 4 degrees Celsius or below within the next 4 hours. In the case of large liquid quantities, such as soups and stocks, an ice bath or ice wand may be used to reduce the internal temperature. And that's just because you can sometimes have pots of soup that are so big that the inside of that soup won't cool quickly enough. So using the ice wand or the ice bath will just cool that food down more quickly. So here is a graph of 3 different foods that were left at different temperatures. So it shows that in only 2 days, 10,000 bacteria kept at 10 degrees Celsius will multiply to 1 billion bacteria. At 5 degrees Celsius, the same bacterial growth takes 8 days, and at 0 degrees Celsius, it takes 18 days. Therefore, it's important to prepare foods in quantities that can be processed within the 2-hour cooking period and as close to the service time as possible. Cooked foods, so they're cooked to 74 degrees Celsius, should be transferred to hot holding units, 60 degrees Celsius at 60 degrees Celsius. Rapid chilling should occur in small portions. When using large liquid quantities, an ice water bath or ice wand may be used. If not cooling rapidly under the right conditions, the food may contain millions of living pathogens or their poisonous toxins. By altering the temperature when storing, you drastically alter the rate of bacterial growth. So the length of time food sits in a danger zone does not have to be continuous for contamination to occur. Food should be taken out of the danger zone as quickly as possible. Tools and equipment. Equipment and machinery are used on a daily basis when preparing food. Organize and locate work tasks to avoid awkward positions and uncomfortable positions for extended periods of time. Very tall workers should consider using a temporary riser to raise the counter heights. Use lower surfaces for pouring, prolonged stirring, or dough preparation. Minimize squatting, kneeling, or bending, and neck forward or bending the neck forward by raising the work surface. Use equipment such as knives and mincers can be hazardous if special care techniques are not applied. How can workers avoid risk of injury? Ensure that training will be provided in a safe operation of any equipment. It is always best to ask so that injuries can be prevented. Follow safe working procedures when using, cleaning, and maintaining equipment and tools. Follow instructions developed by the employer. Workers can ask their supervisor to review operational procedures with them, or they can read the manufacturer's instructions. Avoid distractions when working with tools or equipment. So some equipment that you may come across that could be potentially hazardous include knives. When working with knives, make sure to use a sharp knife that has a non-slip handle and finger guard. Use a flat, secure cutting board or block. Always cut away from your body. Carry only one knife at a time, tip pointed down. Store knives securely in proper racks and in a visible place. Food processors. Safety guards should be in place to prevent access to cutter blades. Use pushers to avoid contact with moving blades. Do not place hands into operating machine to move the food. Dough mixers. Machine safety interlocks and guards must be in place during operation. The bowl must be locked in place to ensure the attachment secured. Do not reach into the machine while it is operating. Unplug or lock out the mixer before trying to remove the dough. Get help to lift the bowl with a suitable work surface near the mixer so that you can retrieve the dough. Slicing machines. Make sure all safety guards are in position. Always use a feeding device to feed food through the machine. Ensure the meat thickness setting gauge is returned to 0 after each use. Ensure the machine is unplugged or locked out before removing a blockage. So here's a picture of some safe cutting techniques. Okay, so you need to make sure that you curl your fingers underneath into kind of a bear claw. So if you do get too close to your fingers, rather than cutting your fingertips off, you might just slice a little bit of skin off. You need to make sure that the knives are secured in the proper racks. Use a cutting board on a flat surface. Use the right knife for the job and make sure it's sharp. Hold your knife with your stronger hand. And care around the sink. Do not drop knives into the dishwasher. Keep knives out of the sink until you are ready to clean them. Clean knives after use and place in a container labeled knives only near the sink. So the prevention of burns and scalds. If oil fire catches, Cover it with a safety blanket or damp cloth, or use a foam or powder extinguisher if trained. Never turn off the gas or power. Never use water, and never carry the burning pan. So if you have oil on fire and you add water, it's going to just spread the oil to other locations in your kitchen and cause more damage. When you're cooking, you need to make sure that you always open lids away from you. You need to use mitts or dry cloths when handling hot objects. If you use damp cloth, the heat will transfer through the cloth and burn you. Wear non-combustible or oil-proof aprons. Don't let handles stick out over the floor. Open hot water or liquid faucets slowly. And wear long-sleeved cotton clothing. Also, when you're cooking with oil, do not overheat the oil or it can burst into flames. Use tongs or frying baskets. And do not put wet items into oil. The water will instantly begin to boil and pop off and potentially burn you. So this is a picture of someone cooking, and there's several issues here. Okay, so she has cleaners right there. Her fingers are sticking out behind the knife. Okay, she has this knife that's hanging out from the outside. Her hair's down, so she could be getting hair and things. She has her own drinking water glass there, which could make people sick. The newspaper could have contamination on it. Okay, so lots of things there that could cause issue. Okay, another picture of some issues. So she's grabbing a hot pot with no gloves. These gloves and these towels are over top of the stove, which is obviously on, which could cause an issue. He is cleaning, there's cleaning supplies back here, and he's up on the stove cleaning with the stove on. Okay, so a danger zone quiz. Remember, storing frozen foods is 18 degrees Celsius, freezing is 0 degrees Celsius, thawing or chilling is 4, hot holding is 60, cooking and reheating is 74, boiling is 100, and body temperature is about 38, right in the middle there.